Hello and welcome. You're watching Vision Plus, and you're going to recognize the person that's on the set with me, Lucile Johnston. She had a program for quite a while here. We're going to hear a little bit about that. We're going to talk about something a little different today. We're going to talk about we'll learn a little bit about some things she wouldn't tell you, I'm sure, when she was on the set. Welcome, Lucile.
Thank you.
We were at a birthday party for Vicki here at Victory Network, and I just found out some things that are so interesting. I just know you'd like to know them too. And if you have someone that maybe you'd like to encourage them, that perhaps they would like to know how to come to know the Lord, or how Lucile Johnston did. And we may even mention another unusual thing, in that she had a daughter that got killed, and of course our Emily, that's usually on the set with me, got killed a couple of weeks ago, and her daughter was killed in a plane crash. And we have the joy of knowing that they have no more troubles. They're now with the Lord, and I can just see Emily up there singing with those angels, doing a little harmony there. Well, your daughter was Sharon Johnston.
That's right.
And you have dedicated a memorial park to her.
Yes, the Sharon Johnston Park, out at Newmarket.
Not too far from Huntsville, here in the Tennessee Valley area.
We gave it to Huntsville in Madison County.
My grandfather had given a park in Arkansas one time, and it was so when you said a park, I was thinking like 6 acres, and I found out it's 250 acres. That is a nice park.
And I was told that 90,000 people used the park last year. And they said there's been an increase of 10,000 every year, and they estimate by the turn of the century that it will be over 200,000 people using the park every summer.
Now, Lucile Johnston is a name that's been known around these parts for a while, quite a while, as an author of several books, this being one of them, Celebration of a Nation. Celebrations of a Nation. That's right. I appreciate you. I know that. And also, Will We Find Our Way? Yes. And there's another one, I don't see the other one here.
The Space Secret of the Universe. I didn't bring it. It's out of print.
And this one, Will We Find Our Way, though, is a book that is, of course, both of these are actually still in print, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
So before we talk about some of the other exciting things, and if you just hang loose, you will be on the edge of your chair with some of the things that you're going to learn today that she didn't tell you on her program, and we're hoping she'll be back on Victory Network. But let's just start out about Will We Find Our Way. What is it about?
Well, it's about the Apollo era. You know, the president committed us, President Kennedy, to putting a man on the moon and bringing him back in a decade of the 60s, which we did in 69. Isn't it interesting how much better luck they had back in those days with getting things done than they are now, that they have changed their whole attitude about the world?
Yes. Why do you think that is?
Well, I believe that God orders our steps.
Oh, yes.
And that He has a plan for everything that we do. And the people in the space program, NASA people, at the beginning of the space age, I knew many of them very well personally. And they were godly men. They were men who knew the Lord and who loved His Word and believed it and acknowledged Him. Dr. Werner von Braun acknowledged the Creator and said that the space program should give us a better understanding of Him and how great He was, and much greater than we realized. And now I went to a seminar called the Werner von Braun Seminar, and there was no, the speaker, the keynote speaker, said the world began, I think it was 10 billion years ago, he said, but you know, they give and take 5 billion without batting an eye. So I'm not sure how many, but it was billions of years ago with a big bang. And there was no mention of God having anything to do with it at all. But Dr. Werner von Braun called Him the Creator of the world.
Well, you are a person that has had interest in a lot of things. And anyone that gives 250 acres to a park of this wonderful Huntsville land has some history to come to. Tell me a little bit about how you, Lucile Johnston, came to know the Lord.
Well, I was a churchian. Grew up in the church, but when I got grown, like so many young people who go off to school, you quit going to church. And I got married, and my husband and I went to the golf course religiously on Sunday morning. But when our children came along, I wanted them to be good and moral. So I took them to church to learn how to be good and moral. And I didn't realize that isn't what religion and what the church is all about at all.
What Jesus is.
And I didn't know Jesus. To me, God was someone who created the world and had left us to work out our lives out to the best of our ability on our own. And he was way out there in outer space. And Jesus was a great teacher. And I had tried to follow his teachings, and they hadn't come off, so I was almost agnostic. But I did know that they taught the 10 Commandments in church back in those days. And I wanted my children to be good and moral, so I took them to church. And I had what I call a divine dissatisfaction, though.
Divine dissatisfaction.
Yeah. I got to saying there's got to be more to life than this. I was, what we had aimed to do, we had succeeded in doing. We had succeeded in business. We were fortunate to have 4 very lovely children, very gifted children. And my mother lived with us, so we were seeing the world. My husband wanted to see the world, and I was willing to go along for the ride. So, everything seemed to be going our way, but I was satisfied, and I wondered why. And I covered it up very carefully because there's nothing more unattractive than a dissatisfied woman who has everything going for her. So I didn't want people to know that I was like that.
What happened that brought it out in the open?
I had 2 friends. One of them was healed miraculously of cancer. And she and the other friend went up to an Episcopal church in Philadelphia where there was a minister, Dr. Price, who believed in the power of God to heal today. And he told them that they should start a prayer group. And they came back to Huntsville and talked it over with our minister. We were in the same church. And he suggested that they pray about it. And they both said every time they prayed, my name came up. Mm. Now, I thought I was doing a real good job of having it made, you know, everything going all right. But the Lord knew that I was hungry.
Now, what do you call going all right and doing well? Give me a
on the
scenario.
Basis of the worldly scenario, successful, and having lots of friends and lots of invitations to parties, and doing all the right things, and our children got along fine, and so it seemed that everything was all right. But you see, I was spiritually dead.
Spiritually dead.
And I was mentally and physically, we were in pretty good shape, but spiritually dead. And you know, that's the eternal part of us. And God so loved the world that he wanted me to have eternal life.
Mm-hmm. So that your name kept coming up.
And
so God evidently had seen in your heart this hunger and
witness
thirst
to me, but they weren't very bold about it. They gave me something to read, and I was busy reading the bestsellers, so I didn't read what they gave me. So, but I was playing golf with this friend of mine, and I said, "Have you ever started off the day with prayer for your family?" And she said, "I tried, but I didn't have very good luck." And I remembered my uncle, who was a Presbyterian minister, had prayer and Bible reading around the family table every morning at 7. He had 7 children. And they were busy people, but they always found time to do that. And I wanted my family to be like his. As a matter of fact, he had 68 descendants, and the ones they married and their offspring, and not a divorce in the family up to now. So I hope they don't have. And a young minister who married into the family said, this couple showed us how to love. And you see, I didn't know that love is what it's all about, the love of God for us.
Well, how did they get through to you? Now they prayed, your name came up, and you've asked these questions.
It discouraged me from starting prayer and Bible reading. And the next day I called to see if they wanted to play golf, and they were going to a meeting in Birmingham. And they were going to see how to start a prayer group. Now, this was back in the early 60s when you didn't have prayer groups outside of the church. But this one that we went to in Birmingham, and I used to go along.
You asked to go along?
Yeah, and I couldn't believe it because it was a beautiful October day, a great day for golf, and I hated meetings, and I thought, I need to have my head examined. What am I doing going to a meeting in Birmingham? But I went, and there were women there who had been meeting together and studying the Bible and praying for 18 years.
18 years.
And they looked like people that I knew and went around with, except that instead of a cocktail glass in the hand, they had a Bible in the hand. And they were very open with each other. Instead of presenting this picture of we've got it made, they were very open with each other about the problems they had, and they were sharing them and praying about them. And they passed around a little thing of cards that had Bible verses on it, and everyone acted like, oh, this is just right for me. And they shared, and it meant so much to them. When I got mine, I treated it like a hot potato. It didn't say anything to me, and I couldn't get rid of it soon enough. But as I left, our hostess said, to think I've only known this for 10 years, all those wasted years. And I felt that I was wasting a lot of years in trivia. And so she said, would you like to borrow the book that got us started on the way? And she loaned me a book, Glenn Clark's A Man's Reach. And I stayed up all night reading that book. And it had a chapter in it, The Lord God in the Affairs of Men. And,
the Lord God in the affairs of men.
And I had not thought that he was interested in my affairs at all.
And what was the next step?
Well, when I got home, my husband had called a meeting of 100 business and professional men. Huntsville was just beginning to open up for the space age, and from 20,000 people, they had grown to 80,000 people, and there was a group of people in Huntsville that called themselves the Huntsville Citizens Committee. And we were having an election the next week. And this group were smearing the city council. And the editorials of the paper were too, going along with it. And my husband was very concerned because he said these were honest men. They were serving at no salary at all. And that if you smeared them and put them down, well, they would drop out, and then you would get people who weren't unselfish and weren't honest, and that we needed people that we could trust. So he called a meeting of 100 business and professional men to see how to answer this campaign of this Huntsville Citizens Committee and the editorials. And they knew the problem, but they didn't seem to know the answer.
They didn't seem to know the answer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what happened next? You must have taken the bull by the horn somewhere along the way there.
Well, I had just read this chapter, The Lord God in the Affairs of Men, and it told how God had intervened in our early American history to bring about this nation. And so I went down to the church, and I said, if you're this kind of God... Oh, to begin with, before I went down to the church, Jimmy called me the next day and wanted me to have lunch with him, and I never got the lunch. He took me to this architect's office, and they were trying to answer these editorials in the paper with ads. And I was advertising manager of a radio station at one time, and he thought I could help write the ads. So I never did get that lunch. But I found out quite a bit about the problem. which I hadn't been aware of before. And we wrote an ad. But I said, you know, I believe I could talk to the editor because we're in the same Sunday school class. And he said, oh, he won't see you because he knows I just called a meeting of 100 people and yes, his editorials. And I said, let's try. So we lifted up the phone and he said, yes, come on over. I'll put the paper to rest at 1 and just come over then. So I went over and talked with him. And a miraculous thing happened. For the first time in my life, 5 people agreed on the same thing in the same words.
Oh, 5 people agreed on it.
The editor said, you know, I'm just telling the truth. I have to tell the truth. And I said, well, but what you think is true and what these other people think is true is not the same. So he got the paper out and I told him what they had told me about the problem. And he said, I can see where I've been wrong. And I'm willing to go 100% of the way to make things right. And I wish you'd go and tell the president of the council this. And I did. And he said the same thing. He says, I can see where I've been wrong. And I'm willing to go 100% of the way to make things right. And sent me to the other council. And, you know, it was just before elections. And, you know, it's hard to find the candidates there on the run, meeting people and shaking hands. But I would drive up to a light, and one of the councilmen would be right there in the car next to me, and I'd say, need to see you. And they'd pull over because I voted. And they would say the same thing. And now, not all of these, the editor reversed himself, but it was so close to election time, not all of them were elected. But the one that I was helping write the ad for, was elected the next time with such a majority that he was automatically president of the city council. And they started the city council meetings with prayer. And the man that said the prayer was a black minister who was blind. And this man that I had helped write the ad for was the president of the council, would go and pick him up and bring him to the council meetings. And this is in the 60s when all the race trouble was supposed to be going on. We didn't have any.
Why do you think we didn't have
Because we were turning to the Lord. And He is the Prince of Peace.
You had another?
And we were praying. You see, now they say the school children can't pray, and, you know, we have to be very careful where you pray. I think you have to be very careful to pray.
That's absolutely true. Lucile, then after you're involved in this, when did you make your personal commitment to the Lord?
Oh, well, that was when I said, when I went into the church to the communion service.
Okay.
Right after that. And I said, if you're that kind of God, this is legally binding on me. I remember I turned in a $100 bill. And I said, this is legally binding on me, regardless of what it entails. I'm going to obey you the rest of my life. I've been trying to ever since. That's not an invention.
Well,
that's why I'm on this program right now.
That's right. You probably said, oh, my goodness, there's lots more.
He said we're to be witnesses to him.
That is absolutely right. Now, we mentioned that you and I both have the daughters that got killed, and I just thought it was so interesting that I knew you off and on for the last 18 months, but I never heard about that. And I trust that there will be a time when I'll quit talking about it. Right now, it seems like everybody I meet, I somehow work it into the conversation. But your daughter was killed instantly, too, in a plane accident.
She was flying at the Boston Naval Air Base in an air show before 200,000 people.
She was the pilot, and she had loved being a pilot.
Loved it.
And tell me a little bit about her and how you feel that your knowing the Lord helped you through that period of time.
Well, I began to hear from the Lord. and my husband was going to have an arterial bypass. And we had been in Birmingham for 12 days while he went through all sorts of tests. And I came home, it was over the Labor Day weekend, And he said, why don't you just go on home? I'm not going to do anything except rest anyhow, and he's not going to operate until after Labor Day. And then you can come back. So I went home, and the telephone rang, and a friend of mine was on the line, and I said, from Birmingham, that's where we were. And I said, oh, Evelyn, we've been in there 12 days. Jimmy's been going through these tests, and he's going to have an operation. She said, why didn't you stay with me? And I said, because Shaw says a 3-day-old guest is like a 3-day-old fish. Because smell, I didn't want to, anyhow, I didn't, so she said, well, you're going to come and stay with me. Well, about this time, the Lord had told me to pray for Sharon. I had the strong impulse to pray for Sharon.
Real unction.
Now, here was Jimmy, you wanted to undergo this arterial bypass.
And she's evidently as happy as can be, doing her, just
right.
really enjoying life.
So Evelyn, my friend, and her husband, he was prayer chairman for the Billy Graham Crusade in Birmingham. And so I said, well, yes, I will come down and stay with you because I feel like the Lord is leading me to pray for my daughter. And I'd love for you and Bob to pray with me. So I went down there, and we prayed every day. And Jimmy was operated on Wednesday, and it went all right. And another friend was in the hospital, and she said she wanted me to come over and stay with her on the weekend. So I did. But let me see, let me get my story straight. On Thursday, we were praying together, Bob and Evelyn and I said, Lord, I trust you. And so I'm just going to put her in your hands. Now, on the following Sunday, when I was staying with the other friend, her daughter was the same age as Sharon, and I was reading her a letter from Sharon about how much she enjoyed flying. And she said, Miss Johnston, don't you worry about her. And I said, Rhoda, I just put her in the hands of the Lord, and that's where she is now, right now. And right now was when the plane crashed. So, you know, that really made me realize that God wasn't taken by surprise. It wasn't an accident. It was just our times are in His hands. And I realized that He had, out of His great love, had let me know until I was ready to trust Him. And anyhow, the night before, I moved to the other friends, and I had been instrumental in all of them becoming Christians, 3 generations. And this has never happened to me again, before or since. But after dinner, we sat around in the living room, and they were asking me, what did I believe about this? And I would answer it. And the son-in-law said, well, I was a prisoner of war in Germany in the Second World War, and my feet were frozen. Now, why did this happen? And I said, well, I just don't know. But in His Word, He says He works everything together for our good if we trust Him. And you trust Him, don't you? He said, yes. And I said, were you a Christian before? He said, no. And I said, well, I don't know what He was doing. But He says in the next verse that He's conforming into the image of His dear Son. And His Son suffered a lot. So I don't think we're exempt from it. And maybe that's how He has to do to conform us to the image. Otherwise, we get very cocky and very independent. But anyhow, I thought I was helping them, but when I got the message the next day that my daughter had crashed, I realized that He had put me through a cram course in faith so that I would know what I believed and not be just shattered.
When I can see some of those things happening as far as Emily's concerned. She had been away in Coast Guard and just Christ for the Nations and just away in college and different things for 10 years. And we moved to Huntsville, and she moved here after we did. She had become single again, and so she just decided to come to Huntsville, Alabama, where we were, go back to college, UAH, because she had studied Russian, and she wanted to go back and study. Well, so when I talked with Vicki, and Vicki asked me to do the program. Well, Emily started, and we did a mother-daughter program.
I wish I had seen it.
Well, I now have, maybe 70 or 60 or so tapes, videotapes with her. And all that time I saw her strength. I saw her dedication to the Lord. And and it has built up my faith. So I think that God does go before, preparing the way for each one of us, and how we need to cope with it. I know at that same meeting were two other people that had lost daughters. There were only a few people here, but Brother Seiler had lost his daughter in a swimming accident, instantly died suddenly, and so had our cameraman. Daryl's daughter had died, Rachel, and so I believe that was her name. If I'm wrong, I hope he runs in here and corrects me real quick. But it was really unusual that it wasn't a very large group, but yet 4 of us, in fact, maybe almost the only married ones had children, and they had 4 daughters that didn't. So what it says to me, Daryl, is Rachel her name? Well, I can't see. The lights are blinding me, so I can't see what he's saying. But I think that the Lord does help us through those times by preparing us. Now, you had a tribute to her by the park, which is, I mean, if it keeps going, it sounds to me like 250,000 people will have visited it in just a couple of years. And you said 90,000 already.
I'm not very good at figures, but they said it increased 10,000 a year, and that it was 90,000 last year.
So
it's been 10 years.
10 years? Well, so how many would that be? I can't even figure that. A lot of people have enjoyed it.
I was married to a cost engineer, so I was putting my mind in neutral on figures.
But that's a lot of people getting enjoyment out there at Newmarket with the Sharon Johnston Park. And it has a chapel, Resurrection Chapel.
Yes.
And what I've been doing in these last few weeks is putting material together that Emily had written, and she'll have a book out very shortly that's just called Emily. But that'll be also help people cope with death in their family, whether it's a daughter, or a mate, or I believe my dad died, so I don't know how it would be to have a mate to die, but have you, over the years, you must have talked to lots of people and blessed them and counseled with them that have lost
that's a
children.
book. Don't waste your sorrows. And I've tried not to waste mine. When we just got to know each other, and you asked me to go to Atlanta with you, I went because I feel like we are supposed to share, comfort others with the comfort that we've received.
I really appreciate that. And
it was a joyful time for me to be with you.
And it was interesting that you have such interest in the history of our nation, and goodness, you must come back and do more of these programs. I'm going to have everybody to have a blitz campaign of letters to tell you, please, because if you don't do it, Lucille, there's no way that I can have a cram course in our history and our space system as you have, and do this, or anyone else in the Tennessee Valley. So you're the one. You need to come back. But it was Howard K. Smith that talked a lot about, at the meeting in Atlanta, about the history of the United States, and
that we needed to return to.
That's right. To the credibility, integrity.
Our founding fathers gave us a wonderful nation, greatly blessed as no other nation ever was. And we have not been vigilant in keeping it, as he pointed out.
I liked what he said, Howard K. Smith, and I always think of that as so many of us as Christians. However, we can do it. We've got it in our genes to get back to the Lord, to have the integrity we had at one time, and then what do we need to do in order to do that?
It's up to we, the people.
That's up to we, the people.
Constitution, we're celebrating it. We're in the fourth. Let's see, the celebration for the Constitution started in '87, September the 17th of '87, and goes through the next year when we celebrate the bicentennial of the Bill of Rights, which has been just blatantly misinterpreted. And maybe we're going to have a chance with this new judge to turn
We're
things
going to
around.
believe that we will.
But, you know, the Constitution starts, we the people. And it's really up to us.
And we is not y'all.
No,
y'all,
it's we.
you.
We the people.
We is you and
Yes,
me.
yes.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that. And if there's anybody else that's lost a child or a mate, I'll be glad to pray with you and to share what the Lord's shown me. Thank you very much. Lucile Johnston, author. She wouldn't let me write philanthropist, but she has helped a lot of people in this world. And author of these wonderful books, Celebrations of a Nation, Early American Holidays, and Will We Find Our Way? And wonderful inspiration to me in the loss of my daughter. And I'm glad that you join us again next time.